Hello, welcome to Oxford Heirlooms. Well, I have my smocking finished and I think that turned out really pretty. Now what I'll do is I took a picture of it and I will put up a slide so that you can see this design at the end of the video. What I ended up doing, the little bishop dress that I made a few years back that's going to go with this bonnet, actually it had this border up along the top. So I have repeated this motif 3 times and I alternated my little flowerettes so that they didn't line up. Okay, now according to my pattern instructions, on this back edge right here, I need to create a French seam. So let me pin that together. I've got white thread in my machine and I've got it set for a straight stitch. So I'm going to pin this into place, lining up my lace in the back of the bonnet. Let me get a pin. Okay. Okay, now I will sew at about 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch away the first pass of the French seam. Get my pins out of the way. Okay, rather than going to the ironing board, I think I'm going to finger fold this seam to one side. Since this is a crisp Swiss batiste, it finger folds fairly easily and nicely. Okay, now let me turn the bonnet and get ready to do the second pass of the French seam. Just keeping my seam as small as possible. Since I can see the first seam through here, I can just stay close to it. Okay, now my instructions tell me along this back edge to sew at 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. Let me trim this a little bit so that it lines up a little bit better. Okay, and then I need to press that in and then press it at 1/2 of an inch. Well, then I need to make a buttonhole next to my French seam. So let me go ahead and sew at 1/8 of an inch away from the back edge of the bonnet. Okay, this will take me a minute to get sewn all the way around. Okay, I got that stitching done, and the instructions told me to fold on the stitching line toward the inside of the garment. So I have that finger folded all the way along on that 1/8 of an inch seam line. Now the next thing it tells me to do is to make a buttonhole large enough for 1/4 inch ribbon to the side of the front seam and 1/2 inch from the stitching line. So I'm going to use my seam gauge and I'm going to measure using my blue pen. I'm going to put a little blue mark 1/2 inch from that stitching line. So my buttonhole needs to be down here. So let me move over to my Singer sewing machine for a minute and I will sew. I think I've got my 3/8 inch cam template in my buttonholer right now, and that will be big enough for 1/4 inch ribbon without it folding over. So I'll be right back. Okay, I've got my buttonhole sewn and it starts 1/2 an inch from the fold line. So now I'm supposed to fold this down by 1/2 an inch toward the inside and ease that along and then sew a casing. So I'm going to pin this into place so that I can sew it. I'm going to start here in the center, I think, and ease it towards the sides. So I'm going to fold that at 1/2 an inch and then start to pin that into place, the casing. And I'll ease it along because the back of the bonnet curves slightly. Okay, so this will take me a minute to get this all pinned. Okay, I've got that casing all pinned in place. So it says to sew close to the folded line to create the casing. There is still a little bit of easing that I have to do, particularly at the back front seam where it kind of takes a sharp curve. So I'm going to sew slow so that I can stay close to my fold line. Take my pins out as I come to them. Okay, this will take me a minute to get this all done. Okay, so I've got my casing sewn on. Now it tells me to draw some ribbon or run some ribbon through the casing. So I'm going to use just a tiny little safety pin because I can't use my loop turner this time. And I'm going to go in the buttonhole through the little French knot and then begin to feed this ribbon along the casing. And then it says to run the ribbon through the casing and draw it up to fit. Okay, this will take me a minute to get all this ribbon run through here. Okay, so I've got that ribbon run through the back and I have come back out of the buttonhole again. So I'm going to pull this ribbon together and ease it into a circle in the back. Okay, now I don't want this to come untied, so I'm going to tie a stopper knot. I'm going to sew do an overhand knot right here at the back of the bonnet. because you don't want that to come untied in the back. Just leave a little bit of an opening. And then I got to take my pin off of the ribbon. And then I'll trim the ribbons, cut the ends at a bit of a diagonal. And tie a pretty bow. And then that way the bow may come untied, but the ribbon won't come untied and actually come out of the casing, which would be kind of disastrous for the bonnet. Okay, so that's going to be, it's going to fit nicely, I think, on the child's head. Okay, the next thing I need to do is I need to sew some ribbons to either side of the bottom of the bonnet in order to tie onto underneath the chin. So I was going to use 5/8 inch ribbon, but I've changed my mind. I've got some 1 inch ribbon that I think, since the smocking is 6 rows wide, I think the 1 inch ribbon will look a little bit better. So I need to, I'm going to sew this on using the same little red flowerette and green lazy daisy leaves that I did on the smocking. So let me go get my smocking floss, and we will attach ribbons on the side of the bonnet. Okay, I've got my floss, and I went ahead and pressed my ribbon because it had gotten just a little bit wrinkled. So I'm going to fold this down by 1/2 inch and by another 1/2 inch, and then using my fabric marking pen, I'm going to make a little blue mark right in the center of the ribbon. There we go. Okay, because I'm going to want to center my little flowerette around that blue mark. Okay, so I'm going to line this up with the center of the smocking. Just like that. Just hold it into place. And then we'll tack it into place when we sew the first flowerette. Okay, so I'm going to come up 1/8 of an inch to the left of my little blue mark. And then I'm going to go back in at the blue mark and make the first of my little petals. I'm going to make a 6-petal flowerette using these little running stitches. And then come back about halfway across and on the top of your first stitch. And go back in about 1/8 of an inch to the right. So that little stitch is slightly above and to the right of the first stitch. Then come back in at the blue mark again and do your third little petal. And go back out about 1/8 of an inch to the right of the blue mark this time. Okay, now we're going to do 3 more little stitches mirroring what we just did above. So come in about 1/8, well, right next to where you went out, 1/8 of an inch away to the right of the blue mark. Then go back in the blue mark. Come back about halfway, about 1/16 of an inch to the right of the blue mark. Go back in 1/8 of an inch to the left of where you came in. Come back in at the blue mark again. There we go. And do your 6th and final little petal. So can you see what I've done there? Let me go ahead and pull this through to the back. Okay, so it makes a little red 6-petal flowerette. Okay, so let me tie that off, and then I'll do my 2 little lazy daisy leaves on either side of the little flowerette. And then we'll have our ribbon tacked on. Okay, so I'm going to come up, keep that ribbon perpendicular to the side of the bonnet. I'm going to come up right next to where I started the flower and make a little lazy daisy leaf that's about 1/8 of an inch long. Grab the little loop and then go into the back to tack it down into place. Okay, I'm going to tie this off. Okay, so I tied that off and tied another knot in my thread. So I'm going to come up again on the right side of the flower and make another flower or lazy daisy leaf. There. Okay, let me tie that off and we'll take a look at it. There, that looks real sweet, doesn't it? Okay, now I've already done the other side of the bonnet, so I'm going to line up the two sides in the ribbon. You know, I'm going to come down here to the end of the ribbon and using my embroidery scissors, I'm going to hold these ribbons together and I'm going to cut a diagonal line to keep the ribbons from fraying. Okay, but we are finished with this little bonnet. So Mary Hunter has a sweet little bonnet to wear with her sister's Christmas dress that I made a few years back. Okay, so this is the final video for project number 18, Mary Hunter's bonnet, a little smocked bonnet. And once again, the pattern that I used was Cherry Williams Bishops and Bonnets. It's one of the few patterns I know that has a smocked bonnet for a baby who's not a newborn. Okay, all right, thank you.